Perk up your ears and engage your brain. It's time for Grounded with author and speaker Ryan Dobson.
Hey everybody, it's Grounded Radio. I am Ryan Dobson, sitting with my friend Toben Heim.
Hello, hello.
I'm going to say happy birthday again.
Thank you.
Yep, I know it's not your birthday, and it wasn't yesterday, although we talked about it, but you deserve a happy birthday anyway.
We have Mark Matlock back on today.
We do. He is the Executive Director of Youth Specialties, an expert in youth ministry, and this is for everyone, not youth pastors alone, but for parents of kids, or if you've got kids that live near you, he can give you lots of ways to reach them more effectively, and this should be a very, very inspiring program. All right, so let's start with Mark Matlock on Grounded Radio. Mark, you're in an interesting position because you're with Youth Specialties, you've done lots of large event format things, you've got Planet Wisdom, and you've worked one-on-one with teens for a long time. So on the personal level, working with teens, interpersonally, one-on-one, how has that changed for you over the years? And then as far as events go, I mean, there's so many things we could send our kids to, and we want to be wise about it. So how has that changed in your world as well? What do you see as valuable in a large group event, and how has it changed for you when you put them on, things like that?
Yeah, well, I think, it was interesting. When I started doing youth events, and Ryan, I think that's where we first met, was you came and visited us at one we were doing in Washington, D.C., I think, with
That's right.
me a long time ago. It used to be when I started with a guy named Dawson McAllister, and he was pretty much the only national touring youth conference where every year they came back to the same cities from coast to coast. And they were massive. I mean, we'd have, 10,000 people in some of these arenas in the cities that we went to, because there really just wasn't anything like it. And it was very much focused on, helping students apply the Bible to their life. So it was very practical life skills or very, fundamental doctrine kind of based stuff. And to be honest, it was the first time that I had ever experienced teaching kind of on that level. Even though I'd grown up in church and in youth ministry, I'd never quite had experienced anything like what they were doing at that event. And but then all of a sudden events started popping up everywhere, and so that kind of like changed the dynamics of student event ministry, I think, because now it became like something that you just kind of did on a regular basis. And there became a lot of players out there in the market, and everyone was offering maybe a little something different. And so there's different kinds of events. There's festival kind of events where there's 10 bands, 10 speakers, and those are just kind of rev you up, charge you up, get you excited about life and your relationship with God. I think those have a place. Then you have events that are really focused around personalities, where you might have one personality that really everybody's coming to see because they like that persona. And then you have, more of, kind of more of a philosophy maybe of ministry. Like at Planet Wisdom, our trajectory is we don't have 5-10 speakers or whatever. We have one theme that's woven throughout our weekend, and we have one band. We have the skit guys come and do our dramatic and humor elements, and then I will teach, and maybe sometimes I'll have a special guest that will come in and teach with me. But we kind of go through a book, and it builds on each other as the weekend goes, because we're really trying to take kids somewhere that it's really hard for them to go during the week. Like, there's certain things I can't do with my small group of kids that I work with every week that I can do at Planet Wisdom, because I have the time and the space to really connect the dots, to intensify the focus of the material. But there's also things that I can do with my kids one-on-one every week for that hour that we get together that I can't do at Planet Wisdom. So it's leveraging and really thinking strategically, I think, about what is this really accomplishing in the ministry, and how do I leverage this across everything? Because just like I think, we talked about the youth pastor saying the same things that the parents do, and the parents are frustrated going, I've been saying that. The same thing happens when you take your kids to an event and you're a youth pastor. Things you've been teaching on for weeks, some guy can say in 30 minutes, some woman can say in 30 minutes, and your kids go, I get it, and you're going,
Yeah.
We just did a 6-week study on that. But it all works together, to help a student be spiritually formed.
So do you feel like, is there a particular type of event that you feel like is going to move in and kind of be the new thing? I mean, the stadium event with all the bands seems like it's had its day. You know, we've had...
Yeah, they're still wildly popular, though, because you get so much value. You know, Mercy Me's doing these, the Rock and Worship Roadshow thing.
Right.
And I know there's the Winter Jam tours that happen. And to be honest, it's like a really low price. I think $10 or $15 or whatever.
Yeah.
And you get all this stuff. And I think that's pretty exciting. And I don't think that's ever going to go away because it's just a great value for the breadth of experience. But I do think events are changing.
How do you leverage that then into that community component? Because where we started was the idea that community is really where change happens for kids. Is it follow-up that happens with the youth pastor afterwards? Is it space built into an event that allows a youth group or a smaller group to get together and process through what's going on? Is it late-night conversations at the hotel? How are those big events best leveraged?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all of that. Like obviously at a concert, you know, a lot of times what you have is just the whole adventure of getting in the church van, driving to an event, experiencing it together, and just having a great experience together that focuses on Christ. And I think that has its purpose in place and probably is not too quickly forgotten either.
Yeah.
But then you have other events where maybe there's deeper teaching or challenge. And like at Planet Wisdom, like we give youth workers like event material before the event and after the event that they can incorporate in their weekly gatherings to kind of help connect some of what happens in the weekends throughout. And we give the kids a workbook that they take home that has extra activities in them for them to do. So it's a matter of following up and, you know, building on those experiences.
So, Mark, if you've got a youth pastor brings a bunch of kids to an event and you're giving them this and they want to continue that follow-up, because really, I mean, you take what you can get. So you've got some kids that have come to an event, they've got something, there's a spark that's been lit, and let's say you've got 8 kids that come and you've got 40 kids in your youth group. You want to continue it because you got 8 kids and maybe 6 of them have got that spark. They're interested. They're thinking a little bit deeper. You know you might be able to get them. So how do you use that follow-up with your whole youth group when really you, in your heart, maybe you know you're going to try to teach them the whole thing and yet maybe the 6 out of that 8 are really going to get it?
Yeah, well, I think you have to really think about why are we doing this event? What does it accomplish? Because I think a lot of people just go, hey, it's a date on the calendar. I'm taking my kids to an event. But they're not necessarily thinking about how this event is affecting them. And I've talked to youth pastors that have taken their kids to certain events that they felt like were spiritually abusive to their kids. And they had to undo damage and unpack stuff, you know, and repair things that had taken place. But then they go back the next year. And I'm like, you know, well, we do it, you know, we have to do a summer event or a spring event, and it's just what we do. And so I'm constantly trying to, you know, help the youth ministry community be really discerning about the things that we expose our kids to, because we really want them to love the Lord with their heart, their soul, and their mind, their whole self, and we want them to be spiritually healthy. So we have to think about that. Some events might be just literally for an opportunity to take a student out of his environment and let him hear the gospel for the first time. Other events might be to take kids a little further, and you kind of just have to trust the Holy Spirit and ride those waves. But I think it's important to be a good, you know, to use discernment in what you're going to and why, and to know a little bit about what you're taking your kids to.
You know, one of the things that I'd love to have you talk about, you're starting to do events with youth workers. I mean, Youth Specialties has always done big, you know, awesome youth worker events with the best speakers and the best bands. But you started doing some smaller gatherings of youth workers. And when I first heard about these, I thought, oh, I wonder if that's going to work. Like, it was a crazy enough idea that I thought this is either going to be brilliant and Mark's going to look like a genius, or this is going to fail horribly and Mark's going to fall on his face. So talk about these smaller events you're doing and tell us, are you a genius or did you fall flat on your face?
Well, I don't think either one. I think I think what I realized was YS started with these ideas books. And basically, youth ministry is a very lonely deep, lonely ministry. It's a lot like being on the mission field in many ways. You know, you're in a grown-up world that's all a culture all around you, but you're really living in a different universe. You know, you're thinking differently in terms of working with students, and chances are, you know, you have to just take a lot of digs. You know, like our youth pastor was at the church at like 10 o'clock a couple weeks ago, and one of the other pastoral team just said to him, "Oh, whoa, what? You're up already?" You know, and it's like you just roll your eyes. You know, like he had a 6 o'clock breakfast Bible study. You know, with kids at Chick-fil-A that morning, and it's just but there's that mentality out there. So sometimes it can feel very lonely. So anyway, Mike Yaconelli and Wayne Rice, they started seeing that some of these youth workers around here, they got some really good ideas that could help us, mainly because sometimes it was getting together and it was the games or the skits or the talks or whatever that were some of the hardest things to put together. The relationships part just came naturally for a lot of people. So they compiled all of these things so that youth workers could spend less time planning and coming up with stuff and more time with kids in relationship. Smart. And they also could share the best of ideas to inspire one another so that they're not just creating it once, but now it's being replicated across the country. So they started these ideas books, and really they were aggregators of all this stuff. Well, then it was like, well, why don't we all get together? We should all get together, to learn, share, and create. And so that's what they started doing, and that was the birth of the National Youth Workers Convention. I had the privilege of continuing to help get some leadership to. And really, what I think happened was, though, is everybody looked at the resources that YS was cranking out, and all of a sudden that became youth ministry and not the support to youth ministry that it was originally supposed to be. So I kind of created these things called Youth Ministry Unconferences, designed around this idea of just gathering people to share whatever's on their heart and mind. There aren't a speaker, there's not speakers, there aren't set agenda items. We come together in the room and we get to know each other, and then we create an agenda for the day. What are the important things we want to talk about? And they're put up on the wall, and then everybody just breaks up and starts having conversations. And there's complete freedom to move around and be a part of different conversations as they're unfolding. And it just creates this great energy of people coming together. But what I see happening is that we're learning how to be present again with one another. And not consumers of youth ministry or resources, but literally the resource. We're realizing I'm an expert in the field. It's not that guy on stage. It's not that person leading a seminar. Sure, they may have some insight and some wisdom to pass on, but I'm doing this in my community. I'm doing this in my church. I'm an expert too. And so sharing with one another, it just had a certain immediacy. And it was just really fun to see where things would go. I mean, I always tell the participants during the opening kind of setup for the day, be prepared to be surprised, because it's just been amazing how God has done amazing things. I mean, people confessing struggles and sin with one another that they're struggling with. I mean, it's just been this really powerful time, and everyone's different. No two have been the same. It's been fun to watch.
How many of these have you done?
I've done about 5.
Are there themes that are emerging, like, that have surprised you? I mean, there's the standard stuff that I think probably everybody would expect, but are there themes that you're hearing come up that you sort of weren't prepared for, or you thought, wow, that's not something that I would have thought of?
I think some of the big things is people realizing, like, that their voice matters. I see that as a very interesting theme. We did one in Dallas, and we had some people that have written books for youth ministry that participated in that day, and they were equal participants. They didn't have any more power in that room over, a volunteer. There's a woman 70 years old who was a volunteer who showed up that day. Yeah. And everybody contributed, and it was amazing because everybody was seen as valuable in the eyes of God, and everybody was seen as having something to contribute, and they did. And it was cool. The 70-year-old woman, she just said, "Hey, I'm during this next discussion block, I'm just going to be over here. I'm just going to be praying. And if anybody wants prayer, just come on over and I'll pray for you. And it was just awesome to see people go over there as that hour was going by, and people were just, sitting there with her, visiting a little bit and then praying. And it was cool.
The thing that's interesting is you've mentioned a couple of times this kind of isolation, this loneliness, the idea that their voices matter. As a parent of a youth, right? I've got a new junior high kid who's participating in a ministry now.
Who's turning 13.
13 on the 9th. So we're pushing it into the teen years. What as a parent, and a lot of our listeners are parents of kids that fall into that age group, what can I do for my youth pastor? I mean, if this is a person experiencing isolation, it's a person whose voice doesn't seem to matter, it's a person who is under a great deal of scrutiny, what can I do to support my youth pastor if I choose to do that? If I want to say, man, you're doing a great job, how do I best show that love to a youth pastor?
Well, first realize that a youth pastor, and if he or she is married, their spouse, may not get adult interaction a whole lot. And so sometimes just inviting them over and letting them be a part of your family or thinking about them in that way, realizing that a lot of times they have very heavily programmed schedules, so they're going to turn you down a lot.
Right.
What ends up happening is after a while, people just kind of give up on people that are youth workers and go, well, we always invite them, they always turn us down. And the reality is never stop inviting. It's appreciated, and when it comes together, it's a beautiful and wonderful thing. They appreciate that. Also, think about how your family can maybe adopt some of the other kids in the youth group that maybe don't have parents that are part of the church family. Some of these spiritual orphans are the ones that the youth pastors spend a lot of their time with because they don't really have any other meaningful adult relationships. Right. And the youth pastor can only take on so much of that. And so to be able to to take on some of those friendships and those other relationships can be really valuable. But just being there and asking them what they need.
Is that a thing where you would just go to a youth pastor and say, give me a couple of kids. Let me know the names of a couple of kids that are on the fringes and let me come alongside them. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. And hopefully, whoever it is that leads your youth group, they're aware enough to go, this is a good thing, and to take advantage of that. But yeah, just say, hey, how can I help you? And sometimes you have to keep asking, because one of the things that youth pastors are used to are people coming in and volunteering and then going, whoa, I feel awkward, I feel uncomfortable, and then they leave really quick. And the reality is that the teenagers need to invite you into their world. And that sometimes takes a little time to develop trust. So just don't give up too soon. I work with teenagers all the time, and sometimes when I'm working with a group that I don't know very well, I'll still feel awkward. And, I now have kids that are teenagers, and sometimes they'll even roll their eyes at me, like, what, And so it just takes some time sometimes to get to that relational level and to look for those opportunities to pop up.
Absolutely. Well, and for parents listening who are going to a church, you don't have to be anything except a parent. I mean, cook food, eat a meal. You don't have to have that salvation conversation every time. It's just...
Absolutely. Just do life together.
Yeah, and give them some normalcy. A lot of these kids who are on the fringe don't have a foundation at home. They don't have a steady or a firm foundation at home. It's chaotic. Maybe they just need to eat food, mac and cheese. Who cares? Just something to give them a little normalcy. If they want to talk, great. If not, who cares? Just get involved. That's the thing. I mean, we had Gary Bauer on. He said, we are called to do more, and we are. I'm going to add something to your plate. Get involved in a kid's life because it's so worth it.
The thing that we've talked about at our house a lot as we prepare for this next phase of life is this whole idea of practicing presence with our kids and their friends, that Audrey can have friends into the house, or Emma can have friends into the house, and it's not that we're necessarily quote-unquote programming for them, like, hey, kids, we're going to go swimming, or we're going to make cookies, but it's being available and around for them and trying to be in the space that they're in. And that's had a powerful impact. I mean, we've seen kids who don't have great home lives that will come hang out at our house because we're around, and we're not trying to force an agenda or push anything on them or over-program. We're just saying, hey, we're here. If you guys want to watch a movie, that's cool. If you want us to cook you some food, we'll do that. If you guys want to run to 7-Eleven for Slurpees, we'll drive. I mean, it's just practicing that presence with kids because a lot of them don't have parents that are present for them really at all, and that's the challenge that it brings up for the youth pastor that I can fill in is that idea that there are parents that are, I call them drop-off parents, that the parent isn't even going to church, but they're dropping that kid off and expecting the youth pastor to do something amazing. And as a parent, I have the opportunity to come along and help fill the void there a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, Jade and I have been talking, my wife, because we really feel like we struggle in that area with creating a home environment that other kids really feel drawn to or that they want to be a part of or whatever. And it's a challenging thing to allow your home to be open and to kind of just let it be bombarded with people you don't know very well. But it's such a rewarding thing when you have these great moments, and it takes time, years even. When I was growing up, there was a student that visited our youth group who was a year older than me that I got to be friends with, and our family, kind of let him just be with our family, go on vacations with us and different things like that. And, right now my mom and dad are on vacation and his family's on vacation with him. And he said, I learned, how to be a father and how to be a spiritual leader, by hanging around, the families of people at the church. And, I don't know that my dad was super intentional about it. It just happened, and just be yourself, and that's the most that you can do. Weaknesses and everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, Mark, let me ask one question in closing. We hear so much about social media, that the lives on social media via Facebook, Twitter, texting, things like that aren't very deep, although they are real relationships. Has social media changed youth ministry at all? Is it really that big of a deal? Is for guys like you that look at it, it's a tool, sure. Is it revolutionizing anything? Is it really making that much of an impact?
It goes back to one of the first things I said. It's redefining relationships and presence. And I don't want to say that it's all bad, but it definitely creates some challenges, and I think in our homes it creates challenges. My wife and I can be just as bad at being on the phone as our kids are. And so at dinner time, we try to eat our meals together as a family whenever possible. And it's, we got a little box by the phone, by the dinner table, and all of our phones go in that box.
Yeah.
Oh.
And, it's just one of those things. We have the kids turn in their phones, at night. Because I realize that any time that we're looking at these things, we're not being present with the people that we're with. And I don't want them, they're obviously being present with somebody else sometimes when they're chatting on phone. I don't want to deny them that presence either. But helping them learn how that affects their spiritual life and their soul, I think, is really important.
So you're telling me that you've got a box by the table, and every time you guys have dinner, all phones communication goes in the box. That's it.
Yep.
And then at night, your kids have to turn the cell phones in.
Yep. Wow. Because I know that if I stay up till 4 a.m. playing Angry Birds and I'm a mature, responsible adult, what chance do my kids have?
Joanne was sitting in the dining room the other day and actually called Audrey from her cell phone because she wanted to tell her something, and Audrey was in her room. So we're using now cell phones to communicate in our own home.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
She couldn't find her, so she called her.
Yeah. And, and man, I can't even imagine. I was watching an older movie, and I thought this wouldn't even work. Most of Seinfeld plots wouldn't even be funny if they had cell phones,
Yeah. Wow.
Think about that when you're watching old sitcoms. That happened when when cell phones weren't that prevalent, but they're waiting for pay phones, or they can't call somebody just to check on something, and a lot of those problems get eliminated. But yeah, I think that it's changed the nature of relationships, and not only that, but kids don't need hubs anymore to come and gather. And youth ministry used to be at least a hub that provided a hub where kids could gather and come together. And now kids are able to organize and self-organize on their own. Mm-hmm. Part of that, I think, is wonderful. It's awesome.
Sure.
The other part of it is, how do we do this now? Because the kids are literally voting on whether or not we're going to go to this thing or not, and the youth pastor isn't even aware of it,
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Well, I love it. Yeah, Craig Rochelle was on a while ago. He has a new book out called Weird. and they just do technology sabbaticals where they'll just say, on Tuesday we have no technology, no TV, no computer, no cell phones, no texting, nothing whatsoever, nothing with a screen, and we're going to do stuff as a family to get a break from that. And I like it, starting small, just saying at the dinner table, no electronics, no communications. When you go to bed at night, you're going to put it away. And Mark, you're doing a great job. We always appreciate you having you on the broadcast. You've got innovative ideas. It gives me inspiration. I don't feel worn down after talking to you. I feel like I'm going to be a better parent. I can actually help kids, and I appreciate that quality in you.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Well, it's a challenge for all of us, but you know what? It's an energizing thing to be able to tackle the challenges of the day.
Mm-hmm. Well, God bless. We'll have you on again.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Mark Matlock for coming on Grounded. We will have links to his website, his blog, to Youth Specialties, to all the resources that we've discussed at groundedradio.com. Thanks for listening. God bless. We will see you next time.
You've been listening to Grounded with Ryan Dobson. Good for you.